persecution and poverty forced them to make the choice of their lives.
Poland, Russia, Romania, everybody just wanted to get out of there.
She said, if you leave, why, I don't ever want you to come back again.
It was a voyage that could last from a week to a month, and the steamship companies understood the profit in numbers.
They gave us a tin plate, a cup of soup, and that much bread. 15 days.
We were riding in the steerage like animals.
You were just wondering where you were coming to or what was going to happen to you.
Journey to America, next on The American Experience. Major funding for this series is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the financial support of viewers like you.
Corporate funding for the American Experience is provided by Aetna. For more than 130 years, a part of the American Experience.
Good evening, I'm David McCullough. What was once the open door to America rises still in New York Harbor like a fairy tale palace. It's the old main receiving hall at Ellis Island and will open next year as a museum of immigration. A centerpiece will be a movie by filmmaker Charles Guggenheim, which has inspired a longer version, tonight's hour, Journey to America. Sometimes the inbound traffic was so thick ships had to wait 3 or 4 days to land. In the peak year, 1907, more than 1 million people came ashore. But what made the rest of the country sit up and take notice was that most of these people seemed so different. They wore strange clothes, ate strange food, and spoke languages nobody knew. Czech, Croatian, Polish, Yiddish, Russian, Italian. Most of them came to escape poverty and religious persecution, or just for the adventure, or because they had a cousin who came first. But they came also because America needed them to do the dirty work, to go into the mills and coal mines. We needed them, and yet we found them threatening. What would become of the country? Well, of course, those strange people became us and made it a far better country.
Over 12 million men, women, and children pass this way. Pass through rooms and corridors haunted with a special stillness, which still remains only in places once noisy with human life. Here they bought tickets for 1,000 places in America. Here they traded their drachmas, their liras, their rubles for dollars. Here they sang their first American songs. They experienced their first American Christmas and Hanukkah. Here they waited to be given permission to pass over to the new land. Tens of millions of us have relatives who came this way, sat in this room, part of the largest human migration in history. Of the many who came, some were turned away. But even they would leave part of themselves in America to remind us why they had come so far, why they had made the journey.
You never know how hard it was to leave her. That was the hardest thing I think I ever had to do.
She said, if you leave, why, I don't ever want you to come back again.
Long, hard life. What?
For centuries, people had left Europe for America. But now there were new reasons to leave. Industrial change and political unrest had brought increased joblessness and poverty to Italy and Southern Europe, and reaching as far north as the industrial cities of Poland and Russia. In the southern European ports of Naples, Piraeus, Trieste, and Constantinople, they gathered to board the ships to America. Some were birds of passage, leaving to seek work and return. Others with hopes to find at the end of the journey the good permanent life that lay, they were told, 3,000 miles across the sea. In the rural areas of Eastern Europe, they had, in addition to poverty, other reasons to look to America. The government was taking young boys to the army. For 20 years, a mother might not see him again. And always there was the police, the historic persecutor of the Armenian, Slovak, and Jew.
They used to come at night, sometimes the Russians, and they wiped out towns. You know what I see now? I see the peasant with a wagon and hay to take me away. The whole town was around my wagon. Everybody came to say goodbye. But I didn't know how to say goodbye.
Poland, Russia, Romania, and everybody just wanted to get out of there.
Those living in Eastern Europe made their way to the railroad, seeking passage to the sea. Some had money for the journey, and some did not. But turning back was seldom an alternative.
I didn't pay no tickets. Get out on a train and pray for luck.
So they carried us just like you would carry a load of a bunch of pigs. If you're gonna move a bunch of calves, a bunch of pigs, would you put them in a passenger car? That's the way they looked at us.
For many, entering the great port cities of Northern Europe was like entering a new world. They had reached the sea, and the immigrant was now in the hands of the steamship company. Immigrants from the east and the north swarmed into Bremen, Antwerp, Hamburg, and Liverpool to be processed for passage to America. They stood in line together, those who saw America as an adventure, with those who saw America as a beacon of hope. It was a business of numbers, an operation designed to house, feed, and process 4,000 people at a time, to identify those American authorities might reject and return to Europe at steamship expense. Fearing epidemics, huge facilities were established to fumigate clothing, baggage, and people.
You go to inspection by the doctor and they take hair by hair like that, see it, if you has got any lice. They say either that or they send her back.
Approved and ticketed, they waited for a new journey to begin. They boarded in many parts of Europe and in many kinds of ships, most to New York and some to other ports. But they had one thing in common. They were traveling steerage, and the steamship companies understood the profit in numbers. It would be the beginning of a voyage that could last from a week to a month.
That was the last time it ever ran again. That was the last trip she made. She should have never made that one either.
For some, it would be an experience without incident. For others, the crossing would provide days for which they were ill-prepared.
They gave us a tin plate with a fork and a spoon, a cup of soup, and that much bread, 15 days.
It was all one big room. I was in the cellar. There was little lights going on there all the time. Little lights. We were riding in the steerage like animals.
You could see a lot of water, but we didn't see the sky. No sky.
To escape the throbbing engines and the smell of spoiled food, those with blankets came on deck for air.
She was sick all the time. People didn't know where the toilets were, and so they had used it. It was a terrible life.
I prayed one night that that ship would go down. It was so horrible. It had to stop for a while for some, the waves was washing. I was very sick. Oh, God, I prayed it to go down.
There's only one thing in my mind. I wanted to get out of there and to come to America.
It appeared like in a fog, and everybody went over to the railing and just admiring.
My God, is this a city on earth or this is a city in heaven? Never seen a building like that, but beautiful. They have to cry.
Everybody was just waiting to get off that, standing waiting to get off that ship. You were just wondering where you were coming to or what was going to happen to you, you know, in your mind.
Still separated from the first class and cabin passengers, who were processed by immigration officials on board, the immigrant from steerage waited yet another boat ride. This one from the Hudson River Pier to an island in the Upper Bay. Crowded into seatless barges and tenders, they approached the place that had become a legend in their mind.
I couldn't get my eyes on that. It's great. I was kind of glad to see Ellis Island as bad as it was. It was good to see any kind of land. It was.
According to the houses I left in my town, this was like, like a whole city. That I almost felt smaller than I am.
C'ho bisogno di qualcuno che parla italiano, italiano. Ho bisogno di aiuto qui, Quando qualcuno che parla italiano.
But when I came to these doors, I saw all these people there. I figured, well, I guess I'll have to stay here for good probably because all these people, what are they doing here? And nobody was happy. You don't know what's going to happen.
Diteli a quelli gente di muoversi di fare la fila. No, lì, più lontano, dai, più lontano, ancora più lontano.
I had a coat and a dress and a pair of shoes. That's it.
One suitcase I had with me. And about $50, I guess.
My basket, my little basket, that's all I had with me.
You were lucky to have the one.
We had no other possessions but that. We had no baggage. We had nothing.
Nothing except the clothes. We had nothing.
Aspetta, basta. Non ci abbiamo più posto there.
Clinging to their possessions, they entered the great building and climbed the stairs.
Jesus, Mary and Joseph, I says, where am I?
They would come right into the big hall, and there they were told to sit and stay there. And they didn't know where they were. It was a new land, but they hadn't been in land. It was just a big hall. And all you could get was tears and crying of the children.
For the vast majority, the process would last less than a day. But now they waited. Those from Europe and the Near East with those who had arrived from the Caribbean. Those who were the first in their family to come to America with those who would be met. Those who came to make money and return with those who were determined never to return.
So they all had this fear, this worry. They were worried about police because they were always checked in the other countries.
The word government frightened me. Government was tyranny. Government was officers who looked at you with the sense that they wanted to hate you or eliminate you. And the idea that there is democracy or that the policeman will help you was very new to me. As a policeman, to me, was someone who could cut my head off.
They look at your eyes, you know, open up your eyes and look at your eyes.
They tell me not to cry because I get red eyes, they ship me back. You know, they send you back to Europe.
Trocon, they call it.
If there's anything, they'll put a chalk mark here. Chalk mark there.
Those identified to be set aside for possible rejection represented a relatively small percentage examined each day. But this was little consolation to a family separated.
You didn't have to know the people, but you know that somebody's missing. The agony they went through. So you know that somebody's missing in the family.
All of a sudden, the thought, my goodness, they're separating us, because that's what the police always did. They separated the men from the women and then took care of the women and children. As long as some member of the family, some loving member of the family was with you, life was tolerable. You lived in a relationship of family love. Even though the other members of the family, you didn't know where they were, you could converse, you could plan, you could warm each other.
It's a terrible feeling. All of a sudden they were gone.
America did not want the burden of an unhealthy immigrant. America wanted a person who could make a living and was not bringing into the country an infectious disease.
And they looked your back over and your lungs and your heart and your everything. And you were sent from one to the other, one doctor to the other.
People were rejected because they showed outward signs of illness, what they considered mental difficulties.
And a lot of people was put away on the side.
I wouldn't want to have been sent back.
And the ship that brought them had to take them back. That was a tragedy.
I decided if they ever have to send me back, I'll jump down to the water and never go back to Russia. I never want to see it again.
Built for 1,500, the dining room often fed 3,000.
There would be dishes and forks and knives and white napkin, long tables, well set. But when the people went in, it was like chaos. And they handed us food. Food was not something people gave you. I never had seen a banana before. I didn't like it, but then I tasted it again.
To me, this white bread was like cake already.
At night, Ellis served as a dormitory for thousands, waiting the new day. Each morning, the great hall would fill, and the noise would begin again. Hopefully, their papers were in order. A clean bill of health, a letter from a relative guaranteeing they would not become a public charge, proof they were not hired abroad or a dangerous alien. In adjacent rooms, the detained were given additional scrutiny and an opportunity to make their case. But accepting an appeal to Washington, the Board of Inquiry was the rejected immigrants' last chance. Through an interpreter, he did his best to persuade and to overcome the complexities of a changing immigration law. But it was in the Great Hall where the vast majority faced their first and their last test. In his hand, the man at the registry desk held the ship's manifest. In his power, the right to interpret questions intended to identify those who should be let in or kept out.
They know a word of English.
I couldn't understand English, not one word.
First question, how much money have you got?
She had to have £5. My father, I remember, gave me that £5.
Do you know how long? It took a couple of years, 2 and 3 years, to get that $25.
My mother, when we got nearer and the person at the desk called our names, my mother turned to me, she says, I was never here. How does she know my name? I said, it's all right, Mom. She knows it.
They asked me my name, and I told them Licht, and they say, how do you spell it? Well, I didn't know how to spell it, and they didn't know it, and they spelled it L-I-C-H-T. I said, it's all right for me, I don't know the difference.
But then they said, all right, you can go.
You're free to go. To Hoboken. Yeah.
There would still be questions of what food to buy for the railroad trip to Chicago or the boat trip to Boston. There were still the strange names, the strange numbers, and the fear of losing one's money. There was the process of buying a ticket to places with unpronounceable names like Pittsburgh, Hamtramck, and Keokuk. But those were details. The island had passed them through. The door to America had opened.
It was as if God's great promise had been fulfilled.
I'm going into a free land. I don't think I ever can explain that feeling that I had that time. There isn't such a thing to be explained. It came out of my system. It's over.
For 1 out of 3, New York City would be a final destination. For the other 2/3, a trip to Hoboken, and the beginning of a rail trip that would take them deeper into America. Only weeks away from the villages and shtetls of the old country, they stood alone on the doorsteps of the nation's largest city.
We pulled our baggage and we followed our father And we went to the elevator. We went to an elevator then. And it took us down there, 14th Street.
It was as if they had arrived in a city within a city. The sights and sounds of the old country, transported to a different place. For millions of Italians and Jews, this is where life would begin in America. At the railroad terminals on the Hudson, those going west waited to board their trains. This would be their first look at the country whose streets, they had been told, were paved with gold.
First train, I heard the whistle. I know I was in a strange country. I got homesick because in this country, trains got that sad whistle. In Europe, they got real bright whistle.
It was traveling almost 2 days to come here. It never stopped, you know, you just keep on going.
Porterhouse, Chicago.
They grab you and said, this is where you get off. Because we didn't know where we had to get off.
Put me there on platform, I was standing there. Didn't think anybody's gonna come and look for me or nothing, I was just standing there. Even if somebody would be at the station, they wouldn't know me.
For every immigrant, there would be a different story on how they found their way to a relative, or a friend, or a street address. But differences soon ended. For the vast majority of immigrants, their first views of the American city was very much the same.
I look out at the window and I see the alley. And I said, oh my God, I said, is this America? I just couldn't get used to this. I just want to go back. I just want to go back.
In the crowded industrial city, any place one could find to live was a place to live.
We walked up. When you're young, you walk up. You run up. We had an apartment of 4 rooms, like a railroad. We lived in one side, a neighbor in the other side. Yeah, screaming. If they were fighting, we heard them. Yeah. It was very close. Very close. We were 7. Then right away when uncle of mine arrived at this country, where would he go to live? where his brother lived. So that's 8. A cousin of mine who was a baker came to this country. Where he was going to live, where his cousin lives. He worked at night, and during the day he slept. So we were quiet. But then another cousin came, so that cousin slept in that bed during the night while the baker worked. We were about 8, 9 people. It was a picnic.
For the very young, it was life as they knew it. For others, it was a struggle to recapture some small part of their life they had left behind. In cities like Chicago, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland, ethnic communities stretched for miles. People could do business without hearing English spoken in the stores or streets. But for the vast majority of immigrants, the opportunity of making a living within their own neighborhoods was not a reality. To survive, they had to venture into the world outside, a world in which their limited education and skills might be accepted. American industry at the turn of the century was hungry for unskilled labor. That is why they had encouraged opening the door to immigration. By 1913, American manufacturing output equaled that of France, Germany, and the United Kingdom combined, and it was still growing.
$11 hours a day, 21 cents an hour. Working like that, hard like that, days after days. I was lucky. I had a chance to sleep and then take a rest, so I could work the next day again.
On the factory floor, it was not uncommon to hear people speaking in 5 languages.
They all speaking broken. But still, we were associating. There were Slovaks, Italians, Serbian, Croatians, and of course there were some Irishmen. An Irishman, he's a foreman.
Even for those who had recently left the old country, the days were long and hard. But here at least, there was something to show for it.
When I made the first check, oh my God, I was happy. I said, nobody gonna chase me away from here.
Serbians and Croatian Italians, they lived on Plan 1, that's close to the mill. So Plan 6 is built for the bosses.
And the company owned the town. You weren't even allowed to walk 2 people together. Police used to tell you, break it up. They called the coal and iron police.
You had 4 rooms. That's all you had.
There were 6 of us living in one room. 6 of us.
Here, infant mortality and death and accidents on the job were no stranger. But at least in America, there were jobs. Nowhere did industry depend on immigrant labor, more than in the packing houses of the Midwest. Bordering on Chicago's ethnic neighborhoods was the largest complex of slaughterhouses the world had ever seen. The yards and buildings covered 250 acres and employed 30,000 men. Inside, Poles, Lithuanians, Czechs, Germans, and Irishmen turned out 400 to 500 cattle every hour into meat.
I most of the time work 11 hours, maybe 12, maybe 9 hours. I was working, I was working sometime even 7 days a day, even Sunday I went to make.
The immigrant, it seemed, had left one set of hardships for another. But in America, the cost seemed worth the price. In the coal fields of Pennsylvania and Illinois, the men who mined the coal were traditionally native-born Americans, or from Britain, Germany, or Ireland. Now a majority were Slovaks, Hungarians, Poles, and Italians.
We started working time 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. You got up and went to work. You had to dig by hand the coal with a pick. Then drill a hole, shoot it down, kneel down and dig it.
In most places, immigrant children were encouraged to go to school. But in the coal fields, tradition as well as low family income encouraged a child to go to work, sometimes at the age of 10.
That's all you see in them days was a father and a son in a coal mine.
Working deep in the pits, sometimes 12 hours a day, children shared the same risk of injury and debilitation as workers twice their age. It was a life that denied young boys a childhood, where in order to survive, one had to grow up before his time. It was in the arena of common hardship and tragedy that a broader consciousness of religious and national differences began to emerge.
Yeah, that was a big explosion. It was down at the Dora mine. 235 lost their life there. Just like there was a Serbian Christmas or a Russian Christmas. Otherwise, it would have been more.
From the iron and copper pits in the West to coal mines in the East, common interests began to unify nationalities that in the past preferred to remain separate.
He was paralyzed. You know how much we get? $100 a month. Oh, yeah.
Working in the dark tenement sections of Boston, Philadelphia, and New York, Jewish and Italian women joined men and children in the needle trade.
I dropped out of school. Whatever they wanted to pay you, take it or leave it. You had to take. I worked till 11 o'clock at night. My parents didn't know what happened to me. And the dust and all that. People took sick. A lot of people died of TB. The inspectors never came around. Used to carry home bundles of work. They work hours, their children helping them. Whoever has a hand helps them out there for hours. In the morning, they bring it back to the factory. A vicious cycle to do at night. Instead of doing their homework.
It was the young and the hope for their future that kept the immigrant committed to the American idea. And it was the public school that first began to fulfill that promise.
In the morning, they used to serve rice and honey. We needed help.
Children derived from 25 nationalities were learning within weeks to speak and behave like other American children.
Whatever they say, your lips will move. Your lips move. I didn't know the alphabet even. Miss Malone, Miss Littlefield. I still remember their names. I even remember my first teacher, Miss Barnes. She was very nice. One fellow tried to put up a fight with me. I didn't know what he was talking about. And she ran right in between and says, "Don't you know he doesn't understand? He doesn't speak the language. Give him a chance."
I work every day. And evening, I go to school.
Concerned about being left behind in a world that their children were now becoming a part, thousands of immigrants crowded into classrooms after work to learn English and American history.
I have to be on 7 o'clock in the school for 3 years straight to gain that. They told me, so when you go home, so practice loud. And I talk to myself. I force myself for English.
In all corners of America, there were settlements inhabited by groups who in Europe had lived together in the same village. It would take 2 or 3 generations before Norwegian, Swedish, and German was replaced by English in many towns as the preferred language on Main Street. For many, there was only one compelling reason to remain here.
It was to get some land and build a house and a home. I wrote in my book that when I get enough money, I will go back to Norway. I didn't think I'd like it. on the prairie.
It took us 10, 15 years before we got enough land so we could support cows, and we had a team of horses.
But once the land was cleared, a person could see in every direction. And like the land itself, the future appeared endless.
Oh, that was good land, that prairie land. We didn't have no farms like that in Norway. There was a couple of Norwegians that had a thrash machine. Peter Sasser and Ole Olsen. And we went from farm to farm all fall and thrashed great big stacks. They were big as buildings and bigger. And it was nothing to it.
Nowhere was the fulfillment of the American promise more dramatically symbolized than on the prairie farms of America. And as the children of immigrants were born American, the promise was slowly becoming a reality, as the foreign-born joined with the new generation in taking pride in their new identity. Some would become part of the great American melting pot, but not as rapidly as legend would have us believe. For they had immigrated not so much to create a new world, as to preserve in more promising surroundings the things they had cherished in the old. They were, as one historian has written, Americans before they got off the boat. For they were the chance takers, the ones willing to try the unknown. They enriched us with their energy, their competitiveness, their determination to persevere, and in so doing proved that the American dream was really not a dream at all, but an idea as old as the Republic itself.
It's not my native land, but it means more to me than my native land. It means more to me than my native land.
Any country on earth, this never happened. Then become a human being again.
And everybody had hopes. And one thing I was sure, and thousands like me, that the degradation, the abuse, and the privation that we had in Europe, we wouldn't have here.
Oh, God, yes. Hoping for centuries.
Among those who came through Ellis Island were Felix Frankfurter from Vienna, who became a Supreme Court justice, a Norwegian family named Rockney, whose small son Newt grew up to be Notre Dame's famous football coach, and 5-year-old Israel Boline from Russia, who, as Irving Berlin, wrote many of the best love songs of our time, including God Bless America. A German who arrived in 1903, Richard Hellman, opened a delicatessen on Columbus Avenue in New York and attracted a large clientele with his special homemade sandwich spread, Hellman's Mayonnaise. Mother Frances Cabrini, the first American to be canonized, was the child of an Italian family that came through Ellis Island. But then there is really no end to such stories. I'm David McCullough. Good night.
Major funding for this series is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the financial support of viewers like you.
Corporate funding for the American experience is provided by Aetna. For more than 130 years, a part of the American experience.
Educational organizations may inquire about video cassettes of the American experience by calling 1-800-424-7963. This is PBS.